But we wanted education that really supports the practical application of what our students are learning directly to the students' lives as well as for their professional work. And of high importance is to be able to offer affordable educational programs. So to support your health as well as your thirst for knowledge, Hawthorn offers 2 webinar presentations each month in holistic health and nutrition at no cost because we believe in your commitment to ongoing learning. Welcome to Hawthorn University's webinar series. I'm Paula Bartholomy, and I'm really delighted you joined me early for just a few announcements because I've invited nutrition consultant Debbie Vail to be with us for our new Book Nook segment where we review a new book and tell you what we think about it. Debbie's going to join us as a regular guest for this segment because it's what we read that matters too. And then at the top of the hour, we'll begin part 2 of our presentation on MTHFR and your mood with functional nutritionist Coleen Walsh. So I'm going to get us started here. Just a few logistics. I want everybody to know that for best audio quality, everyone in the audience is muted. We do that so that we got good sound for the presenter, but we encourage and value your participation. So please post your questions or your comments by typing them in during the presentation using the webinar panel. And be mindful, be paying attention to that panel because we'll be posting information for you there throughout the presentation. You'll be able to get links and just a lot of stuff that Alex is going to post for you so you don't have to write it down and you'll have it there easily accessible. And we'll have time at the end of the presentation for Coleen to answer your questions. And just a reminder that we do give you a survey to complete after the webinar. We really ask for your help with this. It's an opportunity for you to give us feedback about the presentation and to let us know what you'd like to learn more about in upcoming presentations. So it just takes a couple minutes and appreciate that. On our last Hawthorn webinar, it was August 18th, and Coleen Walsh was with us for part 1 of the MTHFR and methylation presentation. If you missed it, we recorded it and you can access it anytime from our website under archived webinars. And this presentation is being recorded too, including the Book Nook segment, so you'll be able to review that again should you need to. And there were a number of people that really appreciated last week's presentation, and we're looking forward to the recording of it so that they can review it again. I think that's it for announcements. Let's get to our Book Nook segment and see how that goes. Hey, Debbie.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm glad you're here. I'm really looking forward to Colleen's presentation and glad that we have a few minutes to talk first. Hi, Coleen. I know you're muted, so just saying hi. And Debbie, you know, thanks a lot for picking the book. You selected Eczema, Itchin for the Cure by Suzy Cohen. And, you know, I've really got the good fortune here at Hawthorn to be able to review new titles all the time. I do it because I need to consider it for curriculum. And Debbie, I don't know what to say about you. You just don't seem to stop yourself. In your functional nutrition study group, they refer to you as the book queen. So I think between the two of us, we have a lot of books to share, right?
That's right.
Okay. So why don't you start us off?
Okay. So I was going to say I think we need to talk about eczema and explain what it is, Paula, first. And from the book, can you tell us what the author says about it?
Absolutely. It's always a good place to start when you're talking about a condition to explain it. The author states that our skin is really an external manifestation of what's going on inside us. And as an example, if we look at a plant, we can usually tell when a plant needs water or more or less sunlight, right? And our skin is, as well as our hair and nails, are good barometers for our internal health. So it really helps to pay attention. And with eczema, when there's an itch and it's chronic, it means the immune system is reacting to something that we're exposed to. And it could be anything like a cleaning product or body care product, a lot of medications. specific types of metals in jewelry, in cookware, and a whole slew of particular foods could be an issue. So I think that's helpful in terms of framing it, but in general, overall about the book, Debbie, what do you think of the book? Did you think there was anything unusual that you found in it?
Yes, if I could choose just one unusual thing that I could find in the whole book, and that would be a product that she recommends called DMSO for horses. And you can't find it in the health food store, but you can find it, and I looked for it on Amazon, and I think I'm going to order me some because it's used on horses to relieve pain and race horses and to get their joints working better. And Dr. Cohen uses it to, she says that if you put something else on your skin before you roll on this DMSO, it will drive it into the tissues. So she uses magnesium first on the skin, and then she rolls on the DMSO, and it drives it into the tissues. And there's been research to suggest that DMSO can help with eczema as well. And so that was very unusual. I've not come across that until this book, and I did look it up on the internet. On Life Extension, the supplement company, they have an article on it. It would be good to read if anybody was interested in finding out more about this.
All right, thanks. DMSO has been heavily used mostly in veterinary practices, as you described it here with horses, but it got a lot of press, particularly in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and was widely available in health food stores, and has gotten a little bit more caution placed with it now, and with good reason. So we could talk more about DMSO in more detail at another time, but yes, it's as you've indicated, as being able to drive substances into the body and just in general help with inflammation and aches in the joints and things like that is helpful.
I think she's called it the best kept secret.
Yeah, when you find it in something like that and you get the history behind it, you think, why doesn't everybody know?
Right.
So it kind of rose to a lot of popularity and has a little bit faded here. So here you are bringing it out to the forefront again. There's a number of contributing factors for eczema. Too many to list here, but why don't you share some of the main ones?
Yes, she did mention metal allergies, especially nickel. And there's a product you can buy to test your jewelry for nickel or any substances that you come in contact with, but she really brings out the nickel, and it could be found in your costume jewelry, on laptops, if your arm is touching metal laptops, cell phones, anything like that could contain nickel, and that could set your eczema off, as well as food sensitivities, dysbiosis, any kind of medication, stress, temperature change, household cleaners, and it just goes on and on.
Okay. So it's a matter of like elimination diets with food. It's identifying what we're exposed to and process of elimination, really seeing how we react to certain things.
Yes.
So other than these specific contributing things that contributed to it, when you're dealing with eczema, are there others besides this that are suggested that people avoid?
Well, she does have in her book a list of histamine-rich foods, as well as histamine-producing foods that would need to be avoided. Molds, antibiotics, acid blockers, alcohol, coffee, refined sugar, and processed foods are some of the things that she lists. But she has a whole list of foods, and it would be very helpful to have that list in front of you if you were working with someone with eczema.
Yeah, agreed. And some kind of the key things, the key things we look at when things are out of balance with us and the clients that we work with. And then specific things, a few of them that might be helpful for people that are dealing with it. What are some of the key ones?
Well, I found it very interesting that she had on YouTube how to make marshmallow root tea, and it's we all think, well, we can just throw it in a cup of hot water and do, but she had some interesting points on that YouTube video, so I would suggest everybody look that up. Type in Marshmallow Root Tea by Suzy Cohen, and that's a really good video. I watched it. She also mentioned that colostrum contains immune factors in it, and especially transfer factor is what they call it, and that would be a good product to use, and also probiotics. So she has several recommendations of brand name products out there to use.
With the yeah, good ideas there. There was a chapter on genes, right?
Right. Oh yes, there was a chapter on problem genes for eczema. So Paula, what did you find in that chapter about genes?
Well, clearly that mutations could be an issue, and yeah, chapter 10 in the book addresses the genetic component of eczema, and when there's mutations in the DNA, it can make people more susceptible to immune reactions, and certainly in this case eczema. And one of the genes affects how much of a substance, which is known as MMP9, is secreted. And if too much of this is secreted by the immune cells, the neutrophils and the eosinophils, then there's an increased susceptibility to eczema, as well as wheezing and asthma. So with this MMP9, you get the addition of wheezing and asthma, and that can be a really common trilogy together. They don't always show up, but here's a contributing factor for it. And then there's another gene called filigrin, and it can be mutated, and it results in more cracks in the skin barrier. And it's estimated that at least 50% of children with eczema and atopic dermatitis carry the filigrin gene. And in order to determine if this gene's an issue, you could consider a couple labs. One of it is the advanced diagnostic testing. That's the lab, and you'd ask for filigrin, the filigrin genetic test. Now I'm going to go through a couple tests here, and Alex is going to post this to the webinar panel, so take a look at it there. The other panel is called the Geisinger Medical Laboratories. That's the lab, and the test is the progenotyper filigrin mutation detection panel. That's a mouthful, right?
Yeah.
But Suzy's suggestion was, if you're going to do this test for yourself, the best option with Geisinger is to do their complete atopic dermatitis panel. It includes the common food sensitivities, which will be an IgE mediator, as well as yeast and bacterial IgE responses. And the presence of these detectable antibodies will perpetuate an inflammatory response and significantly slow healing. So good to identify. And people with atopic dermatitis, they make specific IgE antibodies to the toxins produced by these genes, and also by fungal antibodies to Candida and Malassezi. These are two fungal species. And so having antibodies to these organisms really makes for a vicious inflammatory response if people aren't vigilant about keeping these bugs at bay. So a good piece on lab testing there. And speaking of genetic mutations, I'm going to turn this over to our presenter for today, Coleen Walsh, to take it from here, and I'll introduce her in just a moment. But first, Debbie, I want you to be able to wrap this Book Nook segment up for us and let us know, would you recommend this book?
Yes, I would, Paul. It's not a long book. You can read it in about 4 sittings. And I made an outline of the whole book so that I have it at my disposal at any time I can refer to it. And it's really good to go on and make you an outline of the whole book, and you'll have it right in front of you whenever you need it.
All right. So you're willing to share that?
Sure. If anybody wants to have my outline of the book, I'll be glad to send it to them.
All right. So if you give that to me, Debbie, we'll have James post it with the archive of this webinar so people have that to access too. It's really helpful. Really nice what you put together. Thank you so much.
Okay. You're welcome, Paul, and thank you for having me.
Yeah. I really appreciate you joining us and hope you'll come back again and keep us informed about what to read. It's so important.
Sure. I'll be glad to.
Absolutely. Okay, this concludes our announcements and our Book Nook segment, and time for me to formally introduce Coleen and begin the presentation. So if you just tuned in, let me welcome you to Hawthorn University's webinar series, and thanks for joining us. I'm Paula Bartholomy, and I'll be the moderator for the webinar, and together we're going to learn about MTHFR and your mood, and if your genes are depressing you with Coleen Walsh. Because we're all here to broaden our understanding of MTHFR and why it's important to our well-being. Coleen will begin with a brief review of the methylation cycle, and then she'll dive in to reveal how the depletion of certain nutrients can affect our mood. And many of these nutrients are processed within the methylation cycle, and defects in these pathways can lead to an imbalance. So Coleen will show that our genes are not our destiny and discuss how diet, lifestyle changes, and supplementation can support our clients' emotional health.
Hello.
Coleen Walsh. Hey, hi.
Hi.
I'm going to just turn it right over to you since you are right here, and take it from here.
Sure. Sorry about that. I heard that breath. I wasn't sure if you were telling me to go ahead. So thank you for having me again. I had a great time 2 weeks ago with you, and I hope you guys have learned. And I know I heard from many people that they were returning today. So again, I'm just a functional nutritionist and a master nutrition therapist, and I specialize in MTHFR and methylation. I really enjoy teaching about this subject. I myself am a mutant. I call us all mutants because we all have these genetic mutations, or SNPs as we talk about. Some of them cause more problems than others, but ultimately it's really up to ourselves and our diet and our lifestyle and our whole expression of who we are as people and how we live can really influence our genes. And so today we're talking about mood. Are your genes depressing you? MTHFR and your mood. So just a disclaimer that I don't provide medical advice or diagnose or treat, that this is purely for educational purposes only. And copyright, if you would like to use any of these slides, please contact me or contact Paula at Hawthorn University. So today, as Paula was just saying, we're just going to do a review of what we discussed a couple weeks ago, just to give you a bigger idea. We'll go in a little detail of B vitamins as cofactors and other cofactors in this BH4 cycle, or what we call the neurotransmitter cycle, and how it relates to MTHFR and methylation as the whole, and why and what happens with these mood and psychological disorders. And then we'll take home points with what we can do with diet and lifestyle practices and how we can improve our genetic expression. So this is Dr. Ben Lynch from seekinghealth.org, his pathway planner. It is very complicated. You might understand it a little bit more. We have the methionine cycle. We have the transsulfuration cycle down on the far right, and that drops down from the circle of the methionine cycle on the top right. The folate cycle is right in that center, and then to the left is the biopterin recycling, or the BH4 or tetrahydrobiopterin, the neurotransmitter cycle. And we'll be really discussing this today a little bit more in detail. Not this much detail and not this much detail. This is Dr. Amy Yasko's, but it just kind of gives you a map. This gives you a good idea of the whole understanding of what methylation is and how pretty complicated it can be. So today, again, on Amy Yasko's, we're looking at this cycle right here. But we're going to see how MTHFR enzyme is really at play in that methylfolate is needed for the BH4, and how the urea cycle to the left is important in this whole scheme of things as well. So again, this is just the baby version, my version, the simplified of these pathways. So today that BH4 cycle really takes tryptophan and tyrosine, and actually even phenylalanine before tyrosine, down to these neurotransmitters, serotonin and dopamine, and then down further, degrading these down into dopamine, from dopamine into norepinephrine and epinephrine, and serotonin down through to melatonin, and how methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase plays an important role. And the big picture idea. So we're looking, what I think of as the methylation cycle, sometimes I describe it as Olympic rings. There are 5 independent circles that, when together, really have a bigger meaning and a bigger purpose together. So you see that these work together and they move together to make individual pathways. So each one of these is independent as a circle, as a pathway, but together they have interactions and at points are dependent on each other for certain molecules. So they create something bigger than the individual parts alone. They basically create the methionine cycle, or the methylation cycle, excuse me. And so, again, the methylation cycle, I talk about that it runs like the mechanics of a clock. If one section is flawed, the other sections will respond in kind. So similar to, you saw the Olympic rings go out and make the circle. If you were to take the back of an old clock or watch off and see these gears spinning, you'll see that one pushes, then another will pull, and they respond in kind. So the methylation cycle really runs similarly to the mechanics or the cogs, the wheels of the clocks. And if one gear were to slow down or even speed up, then the others would do the same. And that's very similar to if there's a problem in one of the enzymes. And the enzymes can either slow down or speed up some of these pathways. So just a reminder that our genes are in our DNA in every cell. Those create proteins, and some of those proteins turn out to be enzymes, not the enzymes that we eat in food, but enzymes that are biological, biochemical reactions, and they really push these pathways and they speed up the biochemical reactions in our body so that these reactions can take place when they're supposed to. And so when we have a SNP or a mutation in one of these enzymes, we call them SNPs, or instead of mutations, SNP. And when we have a mutation, that could either slow down the process and slow down the pathway, so you would have a slower process of, say, breaking down these neurotransmitters, or it could speed up the pathway. And some enzymes do both. We'll talk a little bit about that today. But MTHFR generally slows down this pathway, so it creates the methylfolate that is the most bioavailable and biological component that we need in our bodies, that form of the methyl version. And we talked about how that methyl group turns around and really pushes the methionine cycle and donates that methyl group. That's very important for making many molecules such as choline and creatinine and glutathione. So this is a very important nutrient. But methylfolate also works with the BH4 cycle. So we'll just review these 5 biochemical pathways. The methionine cycle is on the far right. It's in the orange, and it takes methionine and down to homocysteine, and the methylfolate helps to remethylate homocysteine. So it adds that methyl group from the methyl tetrahydrofolate, and that turns back into methionine to help this keep spinning. from homocysteine down, we call that the transsulfuration pathway that really creates important nutrients like taurine and detoxifies ammonia and sulfites, and also creates glutathione. The folate cycle right next to it to the left is in blue, and that processes different folates from our food to create that methylfolate. And that MTHFR enzyme is that last step. So that speeds up that chemical reaction to make that methyl tetrahydrofolate. So that methylfolate not only gives the homocysteine that methyl group to keep this folate cycle spinning and the methionine cycle spinning, that methylfolate is needed as a precursor for this BH4 cycle. And so that BH4 cycle pushes the tryptophan to create serotonin and the tyrosine to create dopamine. And the methylfolate is that cofactor. And then that BH4 is also needed for the urea cycle so that we could detoxify ammonia that is created in the transsulfuration cycle. So you see how just in that one MTHFR enzyme making methylfolate, it really does push these pathways and create a synergistic pattern that happens with the methylation cycle. So just a reminder that it manages or contributes to very critical functions that include detoxification, immune function, energy production, controlling inflammation, and what we'll be talking about a little bit more today, mood balancing. And that's because of the neurotransmitter productions. So, as we talked about last time, every single step of these biochemical pathways, in these circles that I showed, these methylation pathway circles or cycles, they have multiple steps. Each one of these has multiple steps in the pathways. And each one of these steps not only requires an enzyme to speed up that chemical reaction that can inhibit the actual end product, or that can inhibit the product and what is going to happen with that molecule or with that nutrient. And the speed that happens with, it could speed up or slow down. We also need the SNP, the enzyme, but we also need the cofactors, which are most likely B vitamins in these pathways, and coenzymes, which are minerals. Magnesium is a big one, zinc is a big one. There's a lot of different minerals that are needed as well as cofactors. So just a quick understanding of B vitamins is that a number of the B vitamins act in the methylation cycle. And actually, I can see all of these in one place or another act as cofactors. So B2 is very important. Niacin is important. We don't want it too high, but we want it at a good level. B5 is very important to help degrade some of these neurotransmitters or catecholamines, and so is B6 as well. Folate, B9, we discussed how methylfolate, that biochemical, that last step of that biochemical pathway, is a cofactor for that. And then we also have B12. That's a very important one as well, because B12, along with folate, on the right-hand side, help to create methionine. Methionine creates SAM, S-adenylyl methionine, and that is needed also as a cofactor down into the neurotransmitters. So again, it's just so many connections of the methylation cycle. But I just want to remind you that folic acid is the synthetic form, and Mira Desi did a great job of discussing that prior to the webinar last 2 weeks ago, and she talked about that it is a synthetic form. So it takes our body a longer time, and it's a little bit more difficult to process that folic acid rather than getting the more bioavailable folates from foods. And it also holds that spot in the receptor site, making it more difficult for the good folates to get through. So what we should be looking for when we look at supplementation, or when we're looking at food products, especially food products that are processed, we don't want that folic acid in our foods. And we would actually rather the bioavailable forms of methylfolate or calcium folinate or folinic acid. So again, we're talking a lot about this, and I hope I'm not going too fast, but I know there's a lot of people that do have a good amount of information. That MTHFR enzyme helps to create the methylfolate. That methylfolate can go a couple different ways. One of the big ways, it donates that methyl group to homocysteine. B12 is right here, we just talked about, and that turns into methionine to keep this spinning. Methionine goes over to SAM. SAM goes out to energy and DNA, but it also comes around here and helps degradate some of the catecholamines down in the neurotransmitter cycle. That methylfolate, again, is also needed as a cofactor to go to create the BH4. So we have tetrahydrobiopterin and biopterin, and so we need to, from BH2, we need the methylfolate to create the BH4. The BH4 is needed to actually break down these amino acids that we get from food to create these neurotransmitters. So again, that methylfolate is needed to break down homocysteine to turn into methionine, methionine into SAM. SAM over here comes around to help with, as a cofactor, with the dopamine and the norepinephrine breakdown. The methylfolate is needed again to go to the left-hand side to be used as a cofactor to create BH4 from BH2. BH4 is needed to create and break down tyrosine and tryptophan from our diet. Tryptophan goes down to 5-HTP. 5-HTP goes down into serotonin. Serotonin goes down into melatonin. Tyrosine, and we get tyrosine actually from phenylalanine, another amino acid from food, to tyrosine, to L-DOPA, and that's right here. L-DOPA goes down to dopamine. Dopamine goes to norepinephrine and epinephrine. And there are more steps in this pathway. This is just a little bit more simplified. We also need BH4 to help detoxify ammonia. And if we don't have enough BH4 to detoxify ammonia, then we will create free radicals where glutathione comes in. And we need that glutathione to help break down those free radicals as our master antioxidant. And there's a couple SNPs in the ammonia detox as well. So again, the BH4 cycle is neurotransmitter production. It really does. This is to break down phenylalanine, and you'll see right here, down to tyrosine, down to DOPA, L-DOPA, dopamine, noradrenaline, and adrenaline. And you see some of these cofactors right here. So you see the B vitamins we discussed. Again, that folic acid, this is one of the only diagrams I could find. It should say folate right there because it's the proper form. And niacin. So you have all of these B vitamins so many different places. Plus we have the other coenzymes, magnesium, iron is very important in these pathways. So if you have anemia, that's going to be a problem. Zinc is important. Copper is important. There's manganese. There's more cofactors and coenzymes, but here are some of them. So it's also the cofactor to produce the nitric oxide, and that's over to the left in that urea cycle that we were discussing. And nitrous oxide is an important molecule that we need in a proper balance, and that's good for our cardiovascular system and exercise. And also, if we don't have enough of that nitric oxide, then the free radical damage is going to push through. So the BH4, again, just to kind of review, cycle starts with that cofactor of MTHF, the methyl tetrahydrofolate. And to create that methylfolate, we need the MTHFR enzyme to do that. It also plays a direct role in the urea cycle, which we just discussed, to make that nitric oxide. And if low, that BH4, that superoxide, will be generated, or peroxynitrate. And those two are big free radicals that are damaging to our body. So we do, and there are two different SNPs on that as well, the NOS and the SOD SNP that we need to be working properly. But for every 1 molecule of ammonia, we need 2 molecules of BH4. So MTHF, methyl tetrahydrofolate, the methylfolate, recycles the BH4, which is necessary for bringing the neurotransmitters from the amino acids, creating the neurotransmitters, and then breaking them down. We also need it to create BH4 so BH4 can be used as a cofactor. So I just wanted to talk about our great neurotransmitters just really briefly here. I'm actually going to go forward one step just to show you this slide. So again, another slide just to kind of see the different cofactors that we need to help break down. So the tryptophan, again, this is a pretty simplified version. There's more steps. The tryptophan goes into 5-HTP and goes into serotonin and goes into melatonin. The phenylalanine goes into tyrosine and down to L-DOPA and then dopamine, and then another step to noradrenaline or adrenaline, which is norepinephrine or epinephrine. And the TNG is trimethylglycine, or the SAM. They help to drop that methyl group to break down adrenaline and melatonin and serotonin even more, And the B vitamins, there's C, there's all of these nutrients that are needed. And these nutrients make our neurotransmitters. So our neurotransmitters really are happy, feel good when they're in balance, right? So we have serotonin, which is the happy, feel-good, pleasure neurotransmitter. And dopamine, the focus, motivation, mental alertness, motivation, right? All of those are so important for dopamine and dropping those down. We also have norepinephrine, alertness, energy. It's very important for keeping on top of things. We also have epinephrine that comes from norepinephrine. Other common terms are adrenaline, noradrenaline, and adrenaline, especially in Europe. We have GABA, which is the biggest inhibitory neurotransmitter, and we also have acetylcholine, and that's memory and word recall, cognition. So all of these neurotransmitters are created in the methylation cycle. And they're all needed to be balanced in the correct ratio, else we can have these obsessive compulsive depression, mood, anxiety, and these mood behaviors. So it's really important to get this balance for our mental health. And when you think about it, probably since you were a little kid, you've heard mental illness is a chemical imbalance, and these are our chemicals that we're talking about. These are our neurotransmitters. So serotonin is really important. And another interesting point with serotonin, that there's very little tryptophan that actually goes through down to create serotonin. It's also a limited amino acid in food, so it has competing amino acids, so there needs to be a proper ratio from our food supply so that the tryptophan can actually get into the brain. It's modulated by carbohydrates. and it is transported in the brain, but insulin resistance and diabetes can inhibit that. Dopamine is really the pleasure center, right? But if we can have, if it's depleted or even high, we can have depression and anxiety. You want to think of that as the fight or flight response, right? Especially you hear the word adrenaline. So adrenaline, that adrenaline rush during that fight or flight of response. And we really need those to be in correct balance, because if we have too high dopamine and it doesn't drop down, then that motivation and that pleasure and that reward is going to actually become more anxiety. And so adrenals are very important, and blood sugar is very important. And so it breaks down to norepinephrine and then down to epinephrine. And then we have acetylcholine. Again, we talked about the cognitive, the memory, the arousal. It's really important for our GI health and our contraction and motility. Also, GABA is very important, and it's really the chief inhibitory neurotransmitter. And it can be synthesized from glutamine, or that turns into glutamates. And so a lot of people have a lot of anxiety with that. So again, these guys work together to really create a nice balance. And if they're not in balance, then there causes problems with some mood disorders. So here's just another slide of how these pathways go, and to the left there's some of the different enzymes that are happening in each one of these steps. And to the right hand side and to the left hand side, you'll see the phenylalanine down to dopamine and down to norepinephrine and epinephrine, and then on the left hand side is the tryptophan down to melatonin. And just another slide to show that. So mood disorders, and how do the SNPs play a role with the mood disorders? So I just have a couple slides of some interesting studies that came out. And this says that the MTHFR and psychiatric disorders, and this was a review, discusses that these results were robust to various sensitive analysis. A meta-analysis demonstrates an association between the MTHFR 677 variant and depression, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, raising the possibility of the use of folate in treatment and prevention. And here's another one, homocysteine and MTHFR 6-7 polymorphisms. There's dozens and dozens of these. I didn't want to go too much into detail. If you go do a quick search with MTHFR, you're going to pull up a whole bunch of them. And this conclusion was high levels of homocysteine can become ill with schizophrenia in the process of illness and affective disorders. So it's showing that not only is MTHFR important with the neurotransmitters, but homocysteine is an important marker too. So both ways that MTHFR goes, whether it goes into the methionine cycle or whether it goes into the BH4 cycle, it's a very important nutrient. In fact, there's several conventional medicines like Deplin, for one, that use folate, in particularly methylfolate and B12, for the use of depression and other mood disorders. And here was another one, and it was interesting because this one says folic acid, and this review says that they weren't exactly sure if MTHFR, CBS, transcobalamin receptor, and MTRR, which is the B12 recycler enzyme, they weren't really sure if it actually made a difference. But then it says you need to take into account not just traditional, but diet biomarkers of nutritional status, genetic factors, and other lifestyle factors to really determine what is happening. So I liked that because genes are not our destiny. They do play an important role, but there's so many different things that we can do with our diet, with our lifestyle, to help improve, and with supplementation to help improve our health. So just again, the methionine cycle to the right, folate cycle here, neurotransmitter, and the ammonia, just to kind of get that big picture view. And so one of those was saying the high homocysteine. And we already know that high homocysteine is an inflammatory marker. It predisposes us to cardiovascular disease as well as Alzheimer's disease. And so obviously that is playing a role with our neuroinflammation. So we'll talk a little bit about SNPs in the cycle, and we've talked about MTHFR a little bit more in the last session, and we've discussed how it's important right now. But let's bring out a couple others. So the COMT, it helps degrade our catecholamines, which are the dopamine, epinephrine, and norepinephrine. So we saw that how MTHFR is needed as a cofactor to produce the dopamine, the neurotransmitter, from our amino acids. But now the methylation also helps to degrade and break them down. So dopamine breaks down to the norepinephrine and then into epinephrine. And we need SAM to be part of the cofactor to break that down. So the COMT is a difficult one because there's different SNPs and there's different ways of that it could turn, and it can go up regulation or down regulation. So it can actually speed up that process and push dopamine too quickly and degrade it too quickly, or it can down regulate and it can slow down dopamine and norepinephrine breakdown. And so both of those obviously can cause a problem because that creates an imbalance of the neurotransmitters, and it also will just keep us revved up in that stress response, that fight or flight mechanism, which is just not healthy for our whole metabolism, our blood sugar, our adrenal health, right? Our cardiovascular health, right? It's just so many factors that go into if those are revved up, but also the same if we don't have enough of these in the down regulation or up regulation, when they just speed up this process and we don't have enough. So both up or down regulation can cause problems. And also the COMT helps to metabolize estrogen as well. And detoxify estrogen, basically. And we also have the MAOA and the MAOB, and they really help to metabolize serotonin. The MAOA does, and the MAOB helps to metabolize the estrogen and the catecholamines as well. And so we also have the GAD enzyme, and the GAD enzyme helps metabolize glutamate into GABA. And so glutamates come from, they can come actually from MSG, and as we know, the glutamates are pretty excitatory, and they can cause a lot of problems, especially with the forms that we get, like from MSG and other added ingredients to make them taste better. But it also can come from glutamine. So people with GAD SNPs need to kind of be aware of how much glutamine they're taking if they're having problems with this SNP. And they go to the inhibitory, the most inhibitory neurotransmitter, GABA. And dopamine is both. It can be both an excitatory and an inhibitory neurotransmitter. Epinephrine and norepinephrine, excitatory mostly. And then serotonin inhibitory, right? So and we want the balance of those. We don't want to be so low on our inhibitory neurotransmitters where we're not having that motivation or that drive, but we don't want too much of those where we're stuck in that section of just that fight or flight response where we just can't calm down no matter what we do. And so since we just talked about these, we'll just show, here's the MAOA. And that comes after we create serotonin. And that helps break down melatonin and break down serotonin. And then the dopamine, we have the COMT, and there's a couple different COMT SNPs that come in different sections in these pathways. We also have the MAOB, which is right here as well. And so these are all important. And as well as SAM and our cofactors that are needed along with these enzymes to process these biochemical pathways. And so B6 is needed, B5 is needed, magnesium is needed, SAM is needed, iron is needed, right? So there's a lot of different, vitamin C, right? There's a lot of different nutrients that are needed in these pathways to keep them regulated as well as the SNPs or the enzymes. And then we can't really forget about our amino acids that can be very important. Phenylalanine into tyrosine and tryptophan to create these to actually break them down. So there's a lot of steps to these pathways. And it's kind of no wonder why people are having problems in the country with sleep disorders and mood disorders. It's because we're not getting the proper nutrients from our food or getting proper nutrients because of our gut health, etc. And our constant fight or flight system that is happening. So here's just the pathway again in motion to show just a little bit the basics, and it can get very complicated very soon as we start looking down further in these pathways. Moving on. So just an important note to remind you that if we have the MTHFR, if we have the C or COMT, COMT, the MAOA, the GAD, the presence of one SNP does not mean there's going to be a problem. The absence of the SNP doesn't mean the pathway is working well either. It's all about epigenetics and how the SNP may not be really being processed or expressing or turning on. But it's also about the nutrients, the B vitamins, these other magnesium, these minerals, all of these things that are important, the amino acids in these pathways as well, how we control our stress. It could decrease our ability to convert the nutrients into usable forms of our body. And so what we can do is diet, really working on our diet, getting the proper nutrients in our diet, but taking out some of the nutrients, or not the non-nutrients, I should say, that we don't need, especially like say for someone with anxiety, and every time they go to a Chinese restaurant, they get more anxious, or they're having like a stress response, right? That might be because there's too much glutamates in that food. There might be MSG in there, right? So getting those types of foods out of there, getting the folic acid out of the diet, and going back to a whole foods diet. Supplying those amino acids that our neurotransmitters and our hormones need to actually be processed, those B vitamins, all those minerals, you know, the stress response and stress management. I spend a good amount of time on stress management with my clients and giving them ideas of what to do with that and how we can drop that response to help our body. stress really impacts the methylation cycle and these pathways in so many different places. And if we're already having this heightened this fight or flight response that's continuous and heightened because of our modern day lifestyle, you add on some of these SNPs, that's going to heighten that as well, plus the food quality. Stress reduction is just imperative to do. Also sleep. Sleep is so important, and they all just go through each other with blood sugar, with adrenal health, with stress. All of these guys are just connected. And then making sure that we are a part of community and we are just really understanding that our thoughts, our emotions really impact our body, and they can have a huge impact on our genetic expression. And nutritional supplementation is very important too. And I didn't go into this because it gets very complicated, especially if the neurotransmitters are out of balance. There is no protocol for one SNP. These SNPs work together. They work together with everything else, with our nutrients, with the diet, with our lifestyle, with our inflammation, with how our metabolism is working. So it's all about balance. And again, this is my favorite quote. It's Dr. Lise Ashuler. And we cannot change inherited genetic mutations. We can, however, utilize our lifestyle to minimize exposure to further mutations and, importantly, to alter how our genes behave. Thus, to understand how to alter our epigenome is to understand how to best prevent cancer. And I'll just add, not only cancer, but all disease and health. So that is the end of my presentation. We'll be going to questions and answers, but I just wanted to tell you that if you want to reach out to me, you can go to my Facebook page, Harvesting Nutrition. Twitter is MethylQueen. I'm on Pinterest, and if you go to my website, I have a free MTHFR Quick Start Guide that tells you about testing for this genetics. It gives you a little bit 101 on different aspects of that. And I am also running a giveaway for a 23andMe genetic test. So make sure to sign up for my newsletter and follow me on Facebook for more information on that. And then I also have my practitioner trainings, and they've had really great response. If you want to learn a little bit more in depth on what happens and what we can do to help with these pathways.
All right, thank you so much, Coleen.
You're welcome.
Nicely done. I really like your graphics. I love the moving methylation cycle, the cogs and the wheels, and seeing things in motion, you can start to begin to see how things play out and translate that in the body, hopefully. So
absolutely, and thank you. My husband worked really hard on that. I'm a visual person. I was a dancer, so I'm a visual person, and I wanted movement in those to try to describe the complexity of it in a simple way.
And it was well done. It was a biochemistry lesson for sure. And I just want to say, if you want to learn more about biochemistry, come learn more about it at Hawthorn, because you can begin to be able to understand this situation and how methylation affects mood and potentially everything, how important it is for us to, as nutrition professionals, to understand our biochemistry. Not that we're going to explain it in this kind of detail with our clients, but we need to be able to understand it so that we can appreciate how to best help them. Okay.
Absolutely.
I also thought that when you were talking about the BH4 cycle and the tryptophan to 5-HT to serotonin, and this really begs for sleep disturbances also showing up in that cycle.
Absolutely, and as we know, our moods come, sleep. I mean, sleep is so important for everything, but, it's so important for our moods. And I know when, I'm not getting the good night's sleep that I need, I get a little cranky and I get a little anxious, and, my neurotransmitters aren't working correctly. So it just all, plays such an important role in our daily lives, not only with mood, but with, like you said, with sleep, with immune function, with detoxification, with, everything.
Yeah. Well, I just looked at the methylation, and it's like, well, it's mood, and I just figured out how you could be on every single summit too, because you just change the title from mood to sleep to mental function to energy to stress reactions, and you're in. This is applicable to everything.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's like every time I do more research, I go down these rabbit holes, and it's like, whoa. We're just such complicated, unique bodies, and we know a lot, and we're learning a lot, but it's still just like, it's amazing how much we don't know and how much we're still learning. But it's a really interesting thing, MTHFR and methylation and SNPs. It's a great tool for me to use and other practitioners to use, especially with really complicated clients. When you're doing all of kind of the normal things, you're helping, you're helping their blood sugar, you're supporting their adrenals, you're supporting, detoxification, all of these different things, and it's just not working. It might come down to these pathways, and it just breaks down to nutrient depletion and nutrient deficiencies.
I'm just, thinking back, it's like to the clients that I see have such anxiety issues, sleep issues, cortisol levels are just off the charts. Adrenaline is running all the time, and so their anxiety is just spiking, and they're not sleeping, their mental function's so impaired, and this just relates to a lot of spirals into other issues that when they don't get out of the cycle, it just keeps getting deeper and deeper into it.
Absolutely, and and there's so many things that can contribute to that as well, like our gut function. Because we know our neurotransmitters are made, a good amount in the gut, and all of them are made in the gut, and serotonin is extremely made in the gut. And if our gut is functioning improperly, and we have dysbiosis, then that's going to really make a turn for our immune system as well as our mood. But then also, like, if we have infections and pathogens, that is, they can really contribute to these pathways as well. So one thing I didn't say is, our microbiome plays an important role in this too, because it's not only the enzyme that we talked about, like say for the GAD enzyme, which we can see at the bottom right here. It's not only the GAD enzyme that helps convert that. It's also B6 and magnesium are two cofactors and enzymes that we need. But it's also bifido and lacto, the probiotics that we need. That's needed to convert that as well in the gut. So it's so complicated, and we need to take a multifaceted approach when we're seeing clients. As a nutritionist, I work with food, but food alone doesn't always do it, and nutritional supplementation sometimes, especially in these pathways, might be needed to help overcome some of these SNPs.
Okay, ready for a question?
Yeah.
All right. Can you explain why it says if you have one abnormal SNP for MTHFR, it says that your folate metabolism about 80% impaired, but with two SNPs, it's even more impaired. Can you explain more about this and what the differences are between having one versus two abnormal SNPs?
Yes. And I think those numbers might be skewed a little bit. Usually, and it depends on which one you have, how many you have, kind of the combination of different SNPs. So I don't, although I might put percentages and ranges of how deficient that could be, it is not 100% accurate, because, you know, we can have the SNP and we could still be healthy because we've lived a really healthy lifestyle up until that point. But we can have a SNP, we don't have a SNP and we've lived a really unhealthy lifestyle, and that SNP is still not working properly. So I hate to put those percentages on there. And it just comes from a number of factors. But for one SNP, so one change in the nucleotide base, that is called heterozygous, and that's usually decreased to a smaller extent than having two SNPs, which is homozygous. Mm-hmm. And that is usually increased. And they say, you know, MTHFR homozygous can be up to 80, even 90%. I think it, you know, we have so many MTHFR SNPs. I think I look more for patterns and lab symptoms, etc., to really kind of determine. I look at a lot of things to determine what the percentage is, and I really actually don't put a percentage on that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, follow-up question to this is, with folate being essential for life, so if you can't metabolize it due to two abnormal SNPs, then does it use an alternate pathway, or what happens?
Well, you're going to metabolize it to, you're going to metabolize it down, and that's for folate, not folic acid. Is that what they were saying?
They're talking about folate, and if you can't metabolize that because of the SNPs, okay, does it use an alternate pathway, and what happens?
Yeah. So there is no alternate pathway. It goes down. It's slower, and it could be decreased significantly, but it's just going to be decreased, and it's going to be slower. Okay. So the methylfolate isn't going to be created to the extent that we would need, and so you may need methylfolate, or you may need, depending on the SNP, there's a couple other SNPs in this pathway, and you may need another version like calcium folinate. And it kind of all depends. Like there's a lot of people with COMT cannot handle the methyl donors because dopamine is a methyl donor. So if this is, if the dopamine is high because of a COMT SNP, they might not be able to handle that methylfolate. Inflammation, people can't handle the methylfolate. So yeah, so the enzyme will work. It doesn't cease to exist, or okay, it doesn't stop everything. It just works at a real slower capacity.
Okay. Thanks. And one more follow-up of this. Again, if you have one or two normal SNPs for MTHFR and you're given methotrexate, what is that doing to your body?
Yeah, methotrexate is kind of an inhibitory of some B vitamins. And so it's going to decrease methylation even further. And there's a lot of vitamins and nutrients that will decrease methylation because they really inhibit different B vitamins like folate and B12 and B6, and some of those are antacids even, just over the counter, and birth control pills. I mean, there's so many medicines that can inhibit this even further. Even alcohol reduces our B vitamins.
Yeah, quite a bit. Okay,
yeah.
Thanks. Okay, and in the first part you mentioned that epigenetic can be passed on from parents. Is that right? If they're exposed to extreme conditions such as starvation or war experiences, does that mean that those extreme conditions and stress causing the gene expression in the parents, and then the expressed genes get passed on to the offspring?
So the expressed genes don't get passed. The genes will get passed. They won't be expressed or not expressed, but they'll have this epigenetic mark left over. And so I haven't delved hugely in depth. I've just read a little bit about it, but they're saying that in times of war and famine, those marks are passed on with the gene. So, but those epigenetic triggers and marks can determine expression and determine how that SNP is really created.
Okay, thank you. just one last thing coming back to nutrient depletion. I'm just looking at this last chart that you have up and how important our nutrients is, and therefore how important holistic nutritionists are, and how important is the work that we're doing and the studying that we're doing and everything we're putting into this. Nutrient depletion is one of the biggest issues that we're facing that affect everything. And eating the best of diets and still be needing more nutrients than we might be getting. So you take that into the equation of people that are eating really lousy diets, to put it mildly, are really suffering here. And our work is enormous to help guide them back to a healthier lifestyle and patterning. So thank you so much for sharing this information with us. It's quite critical, and it really, I think, frames everything that we do.
Absolutely, and I just put a different slide up. Dr. Amy Yasko has a lot of different slides. I think I gave you, in the first presentation, there was her knowyourgenetics.com, and she has a lot of these. But you can see some of the nutrients right there, and there's another one where they put food in there. And so you're so correct. Nutritionists, we can do so much to help our clients, whether it's just getting to be a clean diet will help methylation, and getting these whole foods into their bodies, as well as gut health and adrenal health and blood sugar support, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I really do appreciate you having me, and I thank Hawthorn University for doing these great webinars, and I hope you guys have learned a little bit, and we'll explore methylation a little bit further.
So before you go, we'll have some closing thoughts here, so hang with me for a couple minutes. Sure. But I want to let people know the title of your book. You've got an upcoming book coming out, and let them know.
Yeah, it's called Thriving with MTHFR, a guide for the everyday mutant. So we're all mutants, and it's a slow process because myself, I'm still dealing with some issues, and even though I am so much better than I was a few years ago, I think once we get really sick and go into autoimmunes, etc., have parasites, etc., it becomes a long, steady process. So I am trying to take my own advice and do what I need to do to heal myself, which is kind of going slower with the book. So I was hoping to have it in the next couple months, but it might be extended out.
All right. Well, we'll let everybody know about it as soon as we hear from Coleen, and we'll be paying attention. So
thank you,
good
Paula.
book to have on the bookshelf, absolutely. So I got some closing comments. I want to let everybody know that this was a great webinar, and it was recorded, and it'll be available at the Hawthorn website under archive webinars in just a few days. And you'll be able to review this presentation and a lot of other topics from previous webinars. And reminding those people that weren't here early at 10-15 minutes before the hour, we're adding another segment as we gather and get ready for the presentation, doing a couple things. And today we had the Book Nook segment, and we're reviewing a book. And this isn't to sell books or anything like that. It's just we have so much information, and we want to let you know what we think is good and might be helpful. So we'll also be giving some thumbs down reports on books as they come up. But wanted to let you know about that. And Mira Desi will be on for a regular Food News You Can Use segment, and she's always telling us what's in and on our food and what we need to know about it. So I hope you'll join us for that. And as Coleen said, I hope we've inspired you to learn more about health and nutrition. And if you want more information about the program and courses that Hawthorn University offers, please visit our website for more details. And there's just so much there about our programs and how we do school and kind of details you need to know. And then Kathy McDermott is our Director of Admissions when you have additional questions. There's a survey to fill out. As soon as we close the webinar, it helps us to have your feedback and your comments a lot. We really consider it carefully. I don't take it lightly. I always appreciate you taking the time. And just a reminder that our webinars are the first and third Tuesday of the month. All you got to do is reserve your spot, and if there's others you think would benefit from our educational webinars, please share the information. Just join our mailing list, and we'll let you know about upcoming presentations. And this was a great presentation, and we've got a really good follow on September 15th when Trudy Scott returns with a presentation on Just Say No to Benzodiazepines for Anxiety. This presentation will address the issues with the class of medications that are benzodiazepines and offer healthier alternatives. We'll also discuss nutritional supplements that include really the drug Phenibut. It's an issue to be aware of, and so tune in for that. It'll be 3:50 for our new announcements and Foods News segment, and then the webinar with Trudy Scott. So I hope you join us for that. And yeah, it's a good presentation to tune in to for sure. So I think that brings us to a wrap for today. Thanks for everybody for being with us. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Thank you again, Coleen, and to everyone sharing this educational experience with us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I wish you all the best of health. I look forward to coming again in 2 weeks with you for our next webinar. Until then, take good care, everybody.